Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you didn't belong? Like you were a silent shadow gliding past beams of sunlight that never quite reached you? That was my world in endless twilight of unnoticed moments and unspoken words. My name is Abigail. I'm 27 now, but long before I could even understand who I was swallowed whole by the dazzling light of my sister, Emily. She was the kind of person who made the sun seem dim a golden flame in the small town of Maplewood, where every smile she earned echoed down the streets and every achievement was whispered with admiration. And me? I was the quiet corner of the house that no one looked at, the barely there sigh between conversations. Our home was a place where silence spoke louder than laughter. The walls, though sturdy and painted in warm hues, seemed to press down, heavy with expectation and judgment. The faint ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway was a constant reminder of the moments I was losing, moments overshadowed by Emily's effortless charm. I can still hear the soft clink of fine china during dinner, the murmur of voices mixing with forced laughter, the way Mom's eyes sparkled when they landed on Emily, a look of pride so fierce it almost burned, but skimmed past me like I was a ghost. Dad, ever the stoic, would nod approvingly at Emily's stories while I shrank further into the corner of the room, clutching my napkin like a lifeline. I remember the way the light from the chandelier caught the dust particles dancing in the air, beautiful, fleeting, much like the moments I hoped to be seen. My chest would tighten with a mixture of longing and despair, a quiet plea rising in my heart to be noticed, to matter. Inside me, a storm-brewed tempest of silent questions. Why am I invisible? Why does my light never reach their eyes? Yet every time I tried to voice these questions, they dissolved into the cold air, unheard and unasked. One evening, as rain whispered against the windows and shadows stretched long across the wooden floors, I dared to speak, holding a certificate from school, a small victory I clung to. I approached Mom. Her eyes, dim from exhaustion or indifference, flicked briefly toward the paper before settling back on her book. "That's nice, Abigail," she murmured without warmth. "But Emily's recital is next week. We have to support her." Her words hit me like a chill wind cutting through a summer day. I swallowed hard, nodding silently, retreating back to the corners where my hopes quietly wilted. Later, in the solitude of my room, I replayed the encounter, a looping echo of invisibility. I pressed my palm to the cool glass of the window, watching raindrops race down like the tears I refused to shed. "Why do I have to be less?" I whispered to the empty room, the question hanging unanswered. The next day, at breakfast, the tension hung thick like fog. Dad's voice, low and stern, broke through the silence. "You need to stop being so sensitive," he said without looking up from his newspaper. "Emily has opportunities you'll never get. Be grateful." The sting of his words cut deeper than he knew. I wanted to scream, to tell him how lonely it felt to be invisible in my own home. But the fear of further rejection froze my voice. So I nodded again, shrinking further into my shadow. Emily, ever sharp and certain, caught me daydreaming once in the hallway. Her voice dropped to a sneer, laced with something colder than disdain, perhaps fear. "Maybe if you stopped feeling sorry for yourself, you'd get somewhere." I said nothing. I was tired. Tired of fighting a battle where the enemy was silence and the prize was recognition. And yet, beneath my quiet exterior, a fragile ember glowed, yearning to be loved, to be seen, to break free from the invisible chains. The dining room felt smaller than ever, as if the walls were closing in, swallowing every breath I took. The soft clatter of silverware against porcelain was suddenly deafening in the charged silence. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding, a relentless drum beating through the tension hanging thick in the air. Emily sat poised at the head of the table, radiating the effortless grace that had always made her untouchable. Her laughter, usually light and infectious, now sliced through the room like shards of glass. Mom's eyes shimmered with pride every time they met Emily's, while Dad's gaze remained distant but focused solely on his eldest daughter. I sat at the far end, my fingers twisting the edge of my napkin, my chest tight with a storm I could no longer hold back. The stories about Emily's promotion, her invitations, the envy of the whole town, it was all there, like a spotlight, spotlighting her glory and casting me into deeper shadow. My breath hitched. The familiar gnawing in my gut turned into a fierce flame. Suddenly, the room felt unbearably still, as if the world paused just long enough for me to gather every ounce of courage and frustration I had swallowed for years. "I'm done!" The words burst from me, cracking the silence like a lightning strike. Every eye snapped toward me. The fork halfway to Emily's mouth froze. The old clock in the corner seemed to stop ticking. "My voice isn't a whisper anymore," I said, voice trembling but resolute. "I'm so tired of being invisible, ignored, treated like I don't exist." Emily's smirk twisted into a venomous sneer. "Oh, please, Abigail, don't pretend you matter. You're just the shadow I'm forced to live with." The sting of her words was sharp, but beneath it, something inside me roared louder. "No, I'm not your shadow. I'm Abigail, and I refuse to play the part you wrote for me." Mom's eyes blazed with cold fury. "How dare you speak like that? Ungrateful, disrespectful, you don't know your place." I met her gaze, seeing past the mask of perfection to the trembling fear beneath. Maybe I'm ungrateful because I was never seen. Maybe because I was meant to be less. Dad slammed his fist against the table, the chair scraping loudly as he rose. "Enough! This is a family, not your stage for tantrums." But my resolve did not waver. Family means love, protection, seeing each other, not elevating one and erasing the other. A chaotic storm erupted, voices clashed like thunder, faces contorted with rage, hurt, and disbelief. Emily's mocking laughter rang harsh. Mom's sharp rebukes cut deep. Dad's anger thundered over us all. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I stood tall, fire burning in my veins. That night, I was no longer the quiet girl hiding behind smiles. I was a tempest breaking free. Yet beneath the fury, my heart cracked with 1,000 questions. Was this worth it? Would I ever be more than a ghost in this family? But the answer was clear. I had to stop fading away. The phone's shrill ring shattered the quiet of my cramped bedroom, slicing through the stillness like a sudden gust of wind. My heart thudded loudly in my chest, each beat a thunderous echo in the hollow space where hope and fear tangled. I stared at the screen for a long moment, fingers frozen midair, as if touching the phone might shatter the fragile thread holding my dreams together. Finally, trembling, I lifted the receiver. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, almost surreal in its gentleness. "Abigail Stevens? This is Evergreen University admissions. We are delighted to inform you that you have been awarded a full scholarship to study abroad." The words hung in the air, heavy and electric. A wave of disbelief crashed over me, followed swiftly by a surge of hope so fierce it threatened to break through the walls of my guarded heart. Tears blurred my vision as the reality sank in. This was my chance to step out of the shadows, to rewrite the story that had been written for me long ago. But beneath the exhilaration, a cold tremor of fear slithered through me. Could I really leave behind the family that had never truly seen me? The town that whispered behind my back? The silent years that had chained me to invisibility? As I whispered a shaky, "Thank you," the room felt smaller, the air thicker loaded with possibility and the heavy weight of the unknown. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. I folded and refolded my suitcase endlessly, each item tucked away like a piece of my old life packed carefully into the past. I found myself lingering over small rituals, carefully writing my name on notebooks, smoothing down the pages of a journal, inhaling the scent of fresh paper, a symbolic shedding of the silence that had cloaked me for so long. Yet, even as I packed, unease gnawed quietly beneath the surface. One restless night, unable to bear the silence or the ghosts in my mind, I wandered into the Attica shadowed sanctuary, long abandoned. The air was thick with dust and memories, and the faint moonlight spilled through the cracked window, casting ghostly patterns that danced on the worn floorboards. My footsteps stirred forgotten relics, the soft creaks of old wood whispering secrets only the shadows knew. There, tucked behind a faded trunk, my fingers brushed against something unexpected, a worn, yellowed envelope sealed with the family crest, a symbol I had seen all my life but never truly understood. My breath caught in my throat as I broke the fragile seal. Inside lay letters, their hurried, shaky handwriting spilling out confessions of fear, regret, and silent sacrifices words my mother had never meant for me to read. Photographs slipped free, smiles frozen in time, masking eyes haunted by untold pain. Then came the documents, contracts, debts, secret deals forged long before I was born, binding Emily and me to futures neither of us chose. A cold wave swept over me, chilling me to the bone. The perfect image of my family shattered like fragile glass. I was not forgotten by accident, I was erased by design. Fear and fury collided in my chest, a tempest of betrayal that shattered the fragile hope I had just clung to. Yet beneath the storm, clarity burned bright. This was no longer just a chance to leave, it was a call to reclaim my truth, my life, my voice. In that attic, surrounded by shadows and secrets, I made a silent vow. I would no longer be invisible. I would no longer be silenced. I would fight for the life that was always meant to be mine. The weight of the worn envelope pressed heavily in my hands as I stepped into the dining room, the battlefield where so many silent wars had been fought and lost. The air was thick, charged with an almost suffocating tension, as if the very walls held their breath, waiting for the storm to break. Mom was already seated, her posture rigid, eyes narrowing as soon as she caught sight of the papers clutched in my trembling fingers. Dad sat beside her, silent but taut, a tightly clenched jaw betraying the storm beneath his calm exterior. Emily lingered by the doorway, her usual confident poise faltering for a moment, replaced by a flicker of unease that she hastily masked behind a guarded stare. I laid the documents carefully on the polished table, the fragile letters, faded photographs, and stark contracts that tore at the fabric of everything I thought I knew. Why? My voice was steady but laced with the weight of years. Why did you hide this from me? Why keep me in the dark while you built this empire of lies? Mom's eyes flickered, a brief crack in the mask of control she wore so impeccably. Her hands clenched into fists on the table, knuckles white. Abigail, it wasn't easy. We did what we thought was best for the family. For the family? I echoed, bitterness sharpening my tone. Or for control? You erased me. You lied to me. You stole my childhood. Dad shifted uncomfortably but remained silent, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the table. Emily's lips curled into a cruel sneer, eyes gleaming with icy disdain. You'll never be one of us, she spat, venom dripping from every syllable. But this time, I didn't flinch. I met her gaze head-on, voice unwavering. I'm not your shadow anymore. I'm your reckoning. The room seemed to pulse with raw energy. The tension snapped taut like a stretched wire, ready to break. Mom's breath hitched, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the charged silence. We did what was necessary. You don't understand the sacrifices involved. I leaned forward, eyes burning with a fierce resolve. Sacrifices? You sacrificed me. You made me disappear so everything could stay perfect on the surface. Her gaze flickered between guilt and defiance, her body rigid yet trembling under the weight of exposure. Dad's silence cracked. His fingers trembled slightly as he reached for her hand, an unspoken plea for peace or, perhaps for forgiveness. Emily's eyes narrowed dangerously. You're tearing us apart. You don't care what this does to the family. I care about the truth, I said firmly. The truth that you tried to bury. A sudden knock at the door jolted us all. Mrs. Thompson stepped in quietly, her presence calm but resolute an anchor in the storm. You're not alone, Abigail, she said softly, eyes meeting mine with unwavering support. Mom's lips trembled, her facade crumbling just enough to reveal the vulnerability beneath. I only wanted to protect you from things you couldn't understand. But you protected me by erasing me, I whispered, voice thick with sorrow and rage. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the distant ticking of the grandfather clock each second, a reminder that the past could no longer be hidden, and the future demanded reckoning. The nights grew long and restless. The weight of truth I had unleashed pressed down on me like a relentless storm, battering every corner of my existence. Sleep became a fragile luxury, stolen between the relentless demands of gathering evidence and the gnawing anxiety of what lay ahead. Mrs. Thompson was my steadfast ally, her calm strength a lighthouse in the tempest. Together, We sifted through mountains of documents, bank statements cloaked in secrecy, contracts signed in shadowed rooms, whispered testimonies from those too afraid to speak openly. Each piece of evidence was a shard of broken trust, a thread unraveling the tightly woven facade of my family's carefully constructed empire. In the dim glow of a single desk lamp, we plotted and planned, strategizing with quiet intensity. The silence between us was not empty, it was charged with purpose, a fierce determination to reclaim what had been stolen. Every phone call, every meeting was a battle fought with words and wills. The air was thick with tension and resolve. Outside our battle room, the world was no less unforgiving. The tight-knit community of Maplewood, a town that once offered a semblance of belonging, had fractured like fragile glass. Whispers followed me like shadows, familiar faces turned cold, their eyes sharp with judgment or fear. Rumors spread like wildfire, painting me as the villain, the disruptor, the traitor. Emily's transformation was swift and ruthless. Once the golden girl basking in admiration, she now became the fiercest opponent, wielding gossip and half-truths like knives. Friends vanished, replaced by wary glances and whispered warnings. The same neighbors who once smiled now crossed the street to avoid me. "You're destroying everything," my mother's voice trembled during one heated confrontation, a fragile mixture of fury and desperation. "You don't understand the consequences." But I understood all too well. This was no longer just a personal battle, it was a crusade for justice, for truth, and for the countless silenced voices buried beneath layers of lies. The courtroom became the arena of our war. I stood not merely as a daughter seeking recognition, but as a challenger armed with irrefutable proof and unyielding resolve. Each hearing was a crucible, the air thick with scrutiny and raw emotion. Witness after witness came forward, their stories weaving a tapestry of betrayal, control, and pain. Outside the courthouse, judgment loomed heavy. Strangers stared, whispers followed, and alliances fractured. Yet amidst the storm, a few brave souls emerged, quiet supporters who lent strength when my own faltered. Mrs. Thompson's unwavering presence became my shield, her words a balm to my weary heart. "This fight is bigger than you, Abigail. It's for every voice that's been silenced." Exhaustion seeped into my bones, and doubt sometimes crept in during the darkest hours. Would justice prevail? Could I survive the fallout without losing myself? But each time the shadows threatened to consume me, I remembered the fire that ignited this battle, the fierce promise I had made to never be invisible again. Cracks began to form in the armor of my family's deceit. My mother's once unyielding facade softened into fragile regret. My father, long silent, showed signs of remorse and confusion. Emily's bravado masked a growing desperation, her smiles less certain, her eyes haunted. Maplewood itself was divided. Some whispered betrayal, others hailed courage. The storm I had unleashed was reshaping everything, tearing through old loyalties and forcing painful reckonings. This was no mere family feud. It was a war against silence, fear, and the suffocating chains of a past built on secret. And though the path was treacherous and uncertain, I was determined to see it through, not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever felt invisible, unheard, or powerless. The day had arrived, the moment where years of silence, pain, and hidden truths would be laid bare under the unforgiving light of confrontation. The grand living room, once a quiet witness to whispered secrets and unspoken grudges, now felt like a battlefield drenched in tension so thick it clung to every breath. I stood at the center, the weight of the thick folder in my hands grounding me amid the storm of emotions swirling inside. Each page within was a dagger aimed straight at the heart of the family's carefully crafted Fasadia collection of debts, secret accounts, contracts signed behind closed doors, and letters penned in trembling hands. Every document, a thread unraveling the tapestry of lies that had imprisoned us all. Mom sat rigid on the worn sofa, her face a fragile mask of composure barely concealing the tremor in her lips. Her eyes darted nervously like a cornered animal, searching for an escape that did not exist. Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I feared it might fracture. His usual stoicism shattered into brittle fragments. Emily, once untouchable and radiant, lingered near the window, her defiant smirk replaced by a flicker of fear that betrayed the brittle armor she wore. The silence stretched a taut thread ready to snap until I broke it with a voice steadier than I felt. "This ends today," I declared, my eyes locking onto each family member in turn. "No more secrets, no more shadows. We face everything together, or not at all." Mom's lips quivered as she whispered, "You don't understand what you're doing. You're tearing this family apart." I met her gaze squarely, the fire within me refusing to wane. "I understand more than you think. I know what it means to live in the shadows, to be erased, to be forgotten, but I refuse to be silent any longer." Emily stepped forward, eyes blazing with fury and pain. "You think you can destroy us? Without us, you're nothing, Abigail. Just a bitter girl clawing for attention." I raised a letter high, my voice sharpening like a blade. "This letter, signed by Dad himself, reveals the deals made behind my back. Contracts binding us to a future none of us agreed to. Do you deny it?" Dad's face flushed a deep crimson, and for a fleeting moment, the mask slipped. "It was to protect you, all of you. We thought we were doing what was right." "Protecting by erasing me?" I shot back, my words slicing through the thick silence. "By making me disappear in my own family?" Tears welled in Mom's eyes, but her voice hardened like ice. "Some truths are too dangerous, Abigail. You're playing with fire." I inhaled deeply, summoning every ounce of the storm inside. "The only fire I'm playing with is the one that burns to set me free." Then the room erupted. Words flew like daggers. Accusations ricocheted in the charged air. Emily's venom dripped with years of pent-up resentment. Mom's pleas tangled in desperation. Dad's silence screamed guilt and helplessness. Yet beneath the chaos, a subtle shift began. The walls of deception trembled, cracks snaking through the carefully built facade. For the first time, I saw my family not as infallible pillars, but fragile souls caught in their own prison of fear and regret. Emily's defiance wavered, her eyes flickering with a reluctant remorse. Mom's pride crumbled into tears of regret. Dad's stoic mask broke into quiet apologies that hung heavy like a weighted veil. The storm inside me exploded, years of silence, neglect, and betrayal unleashed in a torrent of truth and raw emotion. When the dust finally settled, the air was thick with exhaustion, but also a fragile hope. We were no longer a family bound by secrets and lies, but a fractured whole forced to confront its pain and begin the slow, uncertain work of healing. The road ahead promised to be long and perilous, but for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never known before: freedom. After the storm had passed and the echoes of confrontation faded, I entered a new chapter of my life-own of healing. It wasn't sudden or miraculous, but rather a slow unfolding of moments filled with vulnerability, self-reflection, and gradual rebirth. I remember the long nights spent in my room, the soft glow of a bedside lamp illuminating my journal pages. I poured my pain, my disappointments, and also the fragile flicker of hope onto paper. Each word was a small step away from the shadows, a quiet reclaiming of my voice. I realized strength isn't about never falling, it's about having the courage to rise every time life knocks you down. This strength is gentle, resilient, and deeply human. My family relationships began to shift not instantly, but through honest conversations and meaningful silences. My mother, once cold and distant, revealed a tender vulnerability, carrying the weight of regret and a desire to learn how to love me anew. My father, who had often been silent and withdrawn, started to open up, tentatively reaching toward reconciliation. With Emily, our bond was fragile, yet real-woven from threads of forgiveness, silent understanding, and the shared scars of a painful past. We weren't perfect, but the cracks between us slowly softened, and beneath the surface, sisterhood was beginning to bloom. Outside the walls of my childhood home, I nurtured new relationships, friendships rooted in authenticity and acceptance. These were people who truly saw me, not the shadow I once was. They became my chosen family, my anchors on this journey toward freedom and joy. Through it all, I learned that growing up isn't about forgetting or hiding your wounds, but embracing them as integral parts of your story, proof of your endurance and resilience. To anyone who has ever felt invisible or forgotten, know this: Your voice matters. Your story matters. You are never truly alone, and inside you lies a storm fierce, unstoppable, and ready to light your way out of the darkness. Thank you for walking this path with me. Hold fast to your inner fire, and remember, every small step forward is a victory. If Abigail's journey touched your heart, sparked a flame of courage, or reminded you that no one should ever feel invisible, please take a moment to like this video. Your support helps share this message with those who need it most. Share this story with someone who might be struggling to find their voice or feeling unseen. Together, we can build a community where every story is heard, every soul is valued, and no one faces their battles alone. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story that uplifts, inspires, and shines a light on the strength within us all. Remember, your voice is your power, and the storm inside you is unstoppable. Thank you for being part of this journey.